Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today for webinar 2, Technologies to Thrive in the New Norm. We've got a special guest today, Ashley Gatehouse, who is our CMO of QUANTIQ, one of our key strategic partners in the Dynamics 365 space. Today is going to be all about how to create a new modern platform with the world of today, the world of tomorrow. It's drastically changed, and whilst the front end model has changed completely, the back end model needs to be taken a look at. So we're going to really look under the hood in that side as well. I'm just going to talk you through some of the things just to make you guys aware in terms of questions and chat. You are all on mute at the moment, but we will do a Q&A at the end as per usual. If you have any questions throughout the session, as you can see on the presentation, please just log them in the questions and chat. I'll then keep a nice list and we'll go through them all at the very end. So without further ado, I am going to pass over to Ashley to take the way and give the content. So over to you, Ash.
Well, firstly, thanks, Ajay, for the introduction. I really appreciate that, and wonderful to be speaking to you all this morning on this topic, which of course we feel passionately about. I just shared my webcam so you can see that I'm doing this live in the luxury, as we're all doing, of working from home at the moment. I'm going to turn the webcam off now just so that I don't distract you as we walk through the presentation. So I thought perhaps the best place to start very quickly is a very brief overview of QUANTIQ, as you may not be familiar with the brand. We're a specialist IT consulting firm. We're based in the City of London, and we have clients all over the world. And we're specialists at creating what we call connected modern enterprises, digital transformation, which by the way is a phrase we personally hate, but seamless connected enterprises is how we talk to it. And we do that through a mixture of some unique IP and some extremely deep skill sets and capabilities across the Microsoft Dynamics 365 and related Power Platform technology structures, and it's those which we'll I think touch on today. We're a gold partner for Microsoft. We're also an inner circle member for Microsoft Dynamics, which means we are one of the top 50 Dynamics partners for Microsoft worldwide, and we're also the largest independent Dynamics consulting firm in the UK, and it's a pleasure to be partnering with Bechtle. We have quite a number of partnerships with highly reputable firms that you'll be familiar with, Bechtle being one of those, and it's terrific to be able to expand their capabilities through our own teams around Microsoft Dynamics, and helping organizations understand, I think, how they can thrive through dramatic change in general, and in particular, I guess, the period of time that we're all living through at the moment. And I'm going to start, if I could, with that notion of change, and we'll all be familiar, I guess, that there are two types of change. Horizontal change, the type of thing that you just don't notice until you look back. You don't notice it on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, but it's only when you reflect backwards you think, my goodness, how things have changed in that particular area or this particular area. I was in my daughter's car recently, and it's not the newest of cars. She's the classic early 20s, making her own way, and I was struck by just the difference in the technology in terms of the electronics in the cabin. I mean, it's a completely different experience today to what it was 10 years ago, but you don't necessarily notice that changing week to week, month to month. And then there's vertical change, the type of thing that is immediately impactful, noticeable. It changes the way we live, changes the way we work, how societies function even. I guess for my generation, and I guess particularly given this is a technology talk, a good example of this, certainly for me personally, was I think back to the the winter of 2008, January, February, whatever it was that year, which was the first time I had in my hand a new iPhone, obviously released the previous summer. And I remember my immediate reaction was all of those BlackBerry devices that back then we all carried around in corporate life were immediately obsolete. The world of personal communication devices had changed almost overnight. So a great example of, I guess, a technological initiator of vertical change. But there are many other initiators. There are legislative initiators, there are geopolitical ones. I mean, you've got a picture here of an Apollo moon rocket taking off. Arguably that whole Apollo program would never have happened, or perhaps never happened in the way it did, if it wasn't for John F. Kennedy's "We choose to go to the moon" speech in the early 1960s. And there are climate impacts on vertical change, and of course public health. And I guess the COVID-19 pandemic is very much in the latter category. And the question I guess we're all asking ourselves is, how much is it going to permanently change the way that we live and work? And the good news on today's chat is I'm not going to add to the numerous voices making various predictions on that topic today. I wouldn't deem myself qualified to do so, and there's more than enough people willing to offer an opinion. I think, however, when it comes to the way we work and the technologies that underpin that, there are quite a few anecdotal sources that are worth our while just reflecting on. I guess whether that's Sir Martin Sorrell, the ex-chief exec of WPP, saying how he would much rather spend the 35 million he spends a year on office rentals on salaries, or if you know Sir Martin, perhaps on his bottom line, or whether it's the Barclays CEO 6 weeks ago stating that the notion of gathering 7,000 people in their offices in London is dead, or even perhaps more robustly, Morgan Stanley stating that they now intend to operate on a zero footprint. I mean, these things are powerful statements, and whether they happen in entirety or whether they're slightly more nuanced. I mean, for example, Allianz, the big German insurance organization, put a note out to their shareholders about 2 months back now, saying that they, with immediate intent to shrink their non-owned office space by up to 30% worldwide, outside of the facilities that they physically own, such as their Munich headquarters. I think that's really interesting in the sense that it wasn't because that they were seeking to minimize cost as a response, as a direct response to protecting their business from COVID-19. But in that particular instance, it was because they had been so impressed by their teammates' ability to work remotely. And that ability to work remotely at scale and at a high level of effectiveness is only possible through modern platforms and modern applications. So I think, will COVID-19 change things permanently? We don't really know. Will it have a significant lasting impact on the way we work and on the way we adopt these types of technologies that we'll touch on today? I think in that instance, the case is much clearer that it almost certainly will. Now, I thought as a way of getting into that, it might help for today's talk to talk about some examples of what I've called here COVID pain points. Now, actually, there's been a lot. There's been a vast kaleidoscope of pain points that have flooded in to our organization and indeed directly to Microsoft over the past 2 or 3 months. Satya Nadella was on record as saying he believes Microsoft have seen 2 years of digital transformation in effectively 2 months. And what I've tried to do to condense today's discussion is to look at that in terms of what are the 3 main areas where we've seen this effect coming into us, and those are in scaled remote working. So the experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, of organizations trying to scale remote working. How organizations, particularly in the retail space, are being challenged around the omni-channel customer experience, really, and how they are dealing with those challenges. And then lastly, the management of demand response. I'll give a few examples on each. So if we think about remote working at scale, the challenges there have almost sort of gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. And I won't name any customers here, but I'll give you one example, which was an interesting one. We had one client come to us whose response to remote working had been that they had, I should say, thousands of people taking phone calls from customers and dealing with those in what you might call rather classic call center environments. And their response to remote working was to ask all of their teammates to go into the office, take their desktop computers home, plug them in, and keep working remotely. Now, you can probably imagine all manner of challenges with that, particularly given that their remote IP protocols didn't really support it, and they'd never really stress tested their VPN connections into their data center. Suffice to say, it didn't work very well, and we had to help them pretty quickly correct some of those challenges. But that stress testing, in terms of VPN access, is a really important issue. We have a very big banking client who had thousands of people needing to work remotely very quickly, and although they had people working remotely on a regular basis, they'd never really stress tested their VPN connections, and when you then hit that with thousands of users trying to do similar things at the same time, they had various downtime challenges and various subsystem downtime challenges, things like Citrix going offline and so forth, because of the impact of that level of demand, and that they never really tested it at that level of stress. So those are some really useful examples that may or may not resonate in your own worlds in terms of the scaling of remote working. I'm going to take demand response next, if I may. Demand response, if you listen to the mainstream media, you would be forgiven for thinking that demand response has only really gone in one direction, and certainly if you are in the hospitality business or perhaps in some parts of the travel industry, demand essentially has been pretty much curtailed, and you can only but feel immense sympathy for people in those parts of the economy. But there are other parts of the economy that are a complete counterpoint to that. So in the grocery sector and in some areas of health provision and banking, demand has frankly been off the charts. I was listening to the chief executive of Sainsbury's talking a month or so back, talking about how they really struggled to scale their traditional demand response mechanisms, certainly in the early weeks of COVID. Order processing, customer service access, the whole 9 yards, really difficult. Log jam call centers, difficulties with uptimes on traditional web pages, all of those types of things. And then, of course, we've all heard the stories of folks trying to get access to the government-backed loans and grants, and people coming on radio shows saying how they were waiting for 2 hours to talk to someone. And those challenges all have a similar foundational issue, which is if you're dealing and trying to scale for exceptional peaks in demand through traditional voice or even traditional web pages, you are going to be challenged in periods like this. And there are other strategies and other technologies that are frankly much more superior to that, which we'll touch on as we go through this talk this morning, which can help. And we've done a number of pieces of work for organisations across all the categories I've just talked to, and indeed with health service trusts and Public Health England to help enable connectivity between patients and their families, where normal interactions through visitors and so forth have not been possible. And then in the middle, the omni-channel experience. I'm going to talk, I've got a whole slide on really this area later on in the presentation, so I won't preface it here, but we've seen a movement, if we are to believe the latest stats, in the UK, 1 in 3 pounds spent over the last 3 months has been online, which is roughly a doubling pretty much overnight of online traffic. And many retail brands have struggled to be able to cope with that. There are lots of reasons for that, but things like stock visibility, where you've got stock in silos in stores and where that stock is not visible to central warehousing, that causes obviously challenges in terms of order fulfillment, where client data is held in different divisional silos and different organizational elements, and you don't have a proper 360-degree view of your customers. That sub-optimizes the customer experience. And then if you combine that with inexperience in terms of operational workflows, so just the order processing, the pick, packing and delivery of product out to your customers, and bear in mind the demand response piece I've just been talking about earlier on, you end up with really a perfect storm for many retailers who have really struggled to provide anything like an acceptable level of customer experience across particularly their online offerings. So these are the types of challenges that I think the COVID-19 pandemic have surfaced, certainly in our world. And I want to talk a little bit about the approach that we tend to take. To start with, a little bit general, and then I'll get into some more level of detail. So if we think about thriving through change and creating those connected, seamless organizations, the way that QUANTIQ would approach that is in 2 parts. So firstly, we think about 3 guiding principles: skills, tools, and behaviors. Behaviors is more about leadership and culture, and that is not the topic for today's discussion, other than I would say clients who are talking about modernizing their applications and platforms into cloud native, AI informed deployments are already probably looking at the right types of cultures and behaviors. It's those organizations that perhaps have not been doing so in the past, and where COVID has really caught them pretty flat-footed and they're playing catch-up. Those organizations are perhaps more likely to have some problematic challenges around open supportive cultures and so forth. What I'll focus on this morning is the skills and tools piece quickly, because it's a more natural segue into how we go about helping clients with a transformational project. And the points I really want to make about skills and tools is that they're essentially joined at the hip. The most important thing that you want to be able to provide your users, your frontline users, those people where the pedal is hitting the metal, the people that are touching your clients and therefore delivering on the experience and the promises of your brand, the tools that those folks are using in a work from anywhere, work from home world have got to be user friendly. They've got to be intuitive. They've got to be connected. And there's loads of reasons for that, and I'll give you some. So first of all, a lot of traditional ERP or even CRM applications aren't necessarily super user friendly. Of course, they could be very effective and efficient when you're trained on how to use them and providing you're in a supportive ecosystem where you can get help easily if you're stuck on something. Now, in the old world where we're all working in offices, it's super easy if you've forgotten how to do something or you just don't know, to lean across the desk or to the person next to you who are probably doing something similar to you and say, hey, Johnny, I can't remember how to do this. And they say, yeah, just press Control or F or whatever it may be, and it'll work. And it does. And consequently, the support requests from users that the normal IT support desk get in those types of environments is only ever a subset of all of the user questions and help that ultimately are being asked and interacted on throughout the organization during any period of time. As soon as you take all of your users out of that centralized office type of environment, they can no longer lean across the desk and ask Johnny for what the answer is. Of course, they can try to maybe Skype or Teams or Zoom call somebody, but ultimately, what we've seen is an enormous increase in IT help desk support requests. And that has had all manner of knock-on effects to organizations' ability to function. Lots of downtime while users are waiting for responses, IT support desks flooded and log-jammed with requests. So in a work from anywhere connected seamless organization, the applications that you're using need to be as user-friendly and as approachable as possible, both for your existing users and to minimize the onboarding of new users. And of course, onboarding in a world where we're all working much more remotely is going to look very different to perhaps the way we are used to onboarding people in the past. And tools like Microsoft Office, very familiar to everybody in terms of personal productivity tools. But if you're thinking about connecting all of your workflows, critical workflows across the organization, having personal productivity tools that sit outside of your core business processes creates disconnects in and of itself. Whereas if you connect Microsoft Office with Microsoft Dynamics, you're able to connect from the first line productivity all the way through the corporate workflows right into the back end of finance and the billing and the collection of money. So you create both very approachable applications, but also a connected workflow that frankly just isn't possible with many old style legacy type implementations. There is a reason why Microsoft Dynamics is the user's favorite ERP platform. Big research went out, PC Magazine recently, 84% global response positive to Microsoft Dynamics as the user's favorite ERP platform. I'd ask everyone on the call, if you ask that question of your users about whatever ERP you've currently got in place today, would it be up at that level? It may be, it may not be, but it's worthwhile, I think, to reflect on. In terms of projects, I guess we're thinking about how do we approach those. Again, many different facets, and they can vary depending upon the client and the requirement. But generally, 4 pillars are what's really important. Enabling that work from anywhere. Working from home is fine, but home, for most people at least, is still a fixed location. Working from anywhere is slightly different, but I think a very important principle, and I've actually got a slide on that in a minute, I'll talk to it. That flexibility of response, making sure you can scale up and scale down for extreme peaks in demand, super important. And then providing, in whatever implementation we do, a single view of the customer, or perhaps more holistically, a single view of the truth. Again, I challenge everyone on the call today, if you think about a classic organization, how often do you hear that something, the data on a customer or whatever it may be, looks different in the sales department than it does in marketing, and marketing looks different to how it looks in finance or how it looks in the contract manufacturing division. And there are lots of legacy reasons why that may happen, and of course people will stitch together reporting and do some clever Power BI work to create single views of the customer. But actually What's most important is for your frontline workers to have a single view of the customer, where they're delivering the value to your organization. Do they have a single view? Do they have access to all of the intelligence that they need surfaced to them in a user-friendly way that allows them to behave differently and to react differently to the requests that they get from customers? And often when we speak to clients and potential clients about that, it may be that they can create a single view of their customer with some fancy reporting, but operationally, are they able to do that all the time? In many cases not, but it's a really important principle that we start from in terms of building solutions for clients. And then the last one is that seamless workflow, making sure that you're not just worrying about what the workflow looks like in this silo or that silo, but how the critical work streams function across the organization, from the front line, typically those productivity tools and day-to-day tools and systems that those folks use, all the way through the organization into the back end. So let's take a look at a couple of those examples in a bit more detail. I want to give you an example of working from anywhere. There's and why that's important. There's a client that we've got, very big charity actually, and they look after people living with disabilities. And people living with disabilities both within the community and in particular institutions. And they came to us with a reasonably classic environment, data center, VPN access, lots of different subsystems and tools that they did different things with in different parts of their business. And they came to us initially with the challenge to say, we've got thousands of first-line workers delivering care to hundreds of thousands of people living with disabilities. And the challenge we've got, we work in a very regulated environment, as you'd expect, and about 25% or 20 to 25% of those caregivers' time, any week or any period you want to pick, is taken up by transcribing effectively manual forms that they were completing and getting their patients, actually they call them customers, to sign, and then inputting that into the ERP system, which they did back at the office or back at whatever location they normally work from. And that took about 2 hours or so in any given 8-hour day. How can we do that more effectively? And we created actually a very holistic ERP, customer engagement, links to finance and charitable giving applications. But one of the things we created for them was an application that their first-line workers could use when delivering care. So when they're with their patient or with their customer, they can input, whether that's with a photograph or whether it's with text, into an application from any mobile device, and show and evidence the care that's being provided. But really importantly, some of these folks are living out in the sticks, where perhaps at times internet connectivity is very problematic, or perhaps doesn't exist at all. So the app continues to work regardless of whether it's connected at any particular point. But what it will do is, as soon as it achieves connectivity again, it will update automatically the main ERP applications, so that those evidence of care provision can be captured correctly and can be reported. And this one application, clearly it's transformed the workflow on a day-to-day basis for the care providing teammates. They now have released 90% of those 2 hours a day that they were sitting in front of a terminal inputting information, and they've released that time, and they can provide more time with the clients and patients they already have, and in reality they can now look after more people, but at no increase to the cost of the team that's doing it. So from the charity's perspective, when that scales up over many thousands of teammates, there are now tens of thousands more people who are living with disabilities that they are now able to support. than they were able to do so before the implementation of this type of technology. And that technology was Microsoft Dynamics. It was Power Platform. The application I'm particularly talking about was a Power App connected to Dynamics, and various flows, or as we would now call them, Power Automate, so where workflow processes were automated. Really powerful technology, really powerful in terms of the day-to-day story that was able to be delivered for that particular client. Let's take a look at that notion of response. So I talked about the challenges of response management that many organizations who had seen these big spikes in demand were having. And the way we have dealt with that is we have deployed Power Virtual Agents. These are essentially chatbots that are available from the Microsoft Power Platform. They are ideal implementations for dealing with repeatable, predictable processes. So whether those are people trying to return goods or whether they are service desk requests where you can broadly predict the questions that need to be asked of the person making the request, or whether indeed they are banking loans and grants to stop people sitting on a phone for 2 hours in order to provide answers to the predictable 8 questions that they need to provide answers to. Power Virtual Agents are beautiful pieces of technology that are able to help with those things and help with them really, really fast. We've done work for various health trusts helping deploy these types of technologies to connect patients with their families from a pastoral care perspective. We've done work with the Cabinet Office to try to help ease some of the demands that were impacting on government loan and support applications. And these types of deployments were done in days, not weeks, not months, days. These are low code, no code technologies that enable organizations like us to very, very quickly understand what the problem is, understand how that can be resolved with this type of Power Virtual Agent, and then to create and deploy solutions very, very fast, which obviously both helps with dealing with the challenge, but also it provides an incredible ROI back to the customer, because they are relatively cheap pieces of technology to be able to deploy with a very big bang for the buck. And really importantly, because they're part of the Power Platform, they are connected. You don't end up with islands of workflows, islands of functionality that is disconnected from the rest of your corporate or organizational workflows. You can connect everything up, and I've got the next slide will help illustrate that point probably a little bit better. Arguably, most importantly, if you allow the bots, if you allow the Power Virtual Agents to deal with the repeatable, predictable processes, your valuable human resource is released to focus on those higher value, more complex interactions that humans are beautifully good at doing. But too often we tie our human resource down doing things that frankly a virtual agent, a chatbot, is much more effective at doing. So I'm conscious of time, and I really wanted to get to this piece. I said earlier on that many retailers, in particular, but I think the use case here is much wider than just retailers, but I'll use retailers to illustrate, I think, my points on this topic. Many retailers have provided a pretty mediocre omni-channel experience running into COVID. Now, there are lots of reasons for that, mostly driven by underlying legacy ERP systems and layers of subsystems and code workarounds that are built up over many years. There are some specific reasons, I think, in the retail space why that has happened, not least because many retail brands, not unrightly, have considered the in-store experience to be paramount in terms of how they operate. But because of that, over time, online elements to their stores have perhaps been either bolted on, or perhaps even worse, considered separate divisions, in some cases even separate companies, to the in-store environment. And therefore data and intelligence and workflows have become very siloed. And I guess the counterpoint to that would be Amazon. We have to think about Amazon. You know, they are growing gangbusters and have been for years and years and years. And there's a reason why, certainly in my opinion, something like Amazon is dominating. And it's not really because of price. I mean, if you try hard enough, in some cases you don't have to try very hard, you can find what you want to buy elsewhere outside of Amazon at a cheaper price. But it's that connected, convenient customer experience, that online experience with Amazon, where you've got that ability to pay with one click. You don't have to put lots of information in. They know all about you. They know how you want to pay or what your payment preferences are. And it's just find what you want, buy it, click, and I'm done. And you're done very, very fast. If you have a think about Amazon's entry into physical stores, and you look at the Amazon Go stores, I don't know if anyone on this call has been to an Amazon Go store, but you scan your QR code when you go into the store and you just take whatever you need. The shelves are weight sensitive. They know exactly what you've taken from the shelf. You put it in your bag and you leave, and your Amazon account is automatically debited from what you've bought. There is no checkout. In fact, that notion of the checkout, you remember that before COVID, where we'd all go to a store, we find what we want, and we queue up with a whole bunch of other people in the same place to go and pay for it. Now, you could argue, and people have, that the notion of the checkout was outdated before we went into COVID. You can certainly find a sizable proportion of the market today who would perceive it as positively dangerous. And retailers, and I can tell you, we're talking to a lot of them at the moment, are way on the way to evolving how that whole in-store experience works. That the notion of the checkout is very much under pressure. You're going to find a lot more pay capability in close association with the product display. You're going to find a lot more near field scanning capability, where you just point your device at a terminal from about 6 feet away. It automatically takes payment for what you want. And of course, as soon as you get into that, it's okay, what I want to now do with the product. So you're going to find a lot more retailers able to offer you the ability to, yes, of course, to take from store, but actually you might want that product delivered to home. You might want it delivered somewhere else where you can easily pick it up. That whole notion of store displays and people doing them, you're going to see a lot more digital displays, the types of displays that are able to provide much more information. And by the way, change language. If you happen to be Japanese and you want to look at something in your own language, you simply just tell it and it will change. The whole notion of beacons, I don't know how many people on the call have been thinking about this, but provided you give your privacy approval to your favorite retail brand, you're going to find them scanning, whether that's through facial recognition or that Q code type scanning when you enter the store, and you're going to find personalized pricing, personalized offers on those digital displays just for you, and various other in-store experiences. The in-store is going to become much more experiential and more digitally driven than it was certainly pre-COVID, and you're going to see those advances quite quickly, certainly over the next year to 2 years. Many of the things I've just mentioned will be visible in our favorite stores, but they all have one founding principle. They are driven by modern cloud platforms and cloud applications. They will not be enabled through legacy ERP systems, and the pace of digital transformation, if you want to use that phrase, within retail is going to be geometric over the next year to 18 months. Apps like Dynamics 365 Commerce, which if you haven't seen that and you're in the retail space, I'd seriously encourage you to go take a look at it. Very powerful application. It would facilitate all of the things I've just talked to. Plus, you can out Amazon. It has proper B2B functionality. So if you're needing to have set pricing or contract pricing capability for your customers, D365 Commerce supports that in a way that Amazon at the moment don't. The other application I want to touch on in this space is Microsoft Customer Insights. If you haven't seen Microsoft Customer Insights, it really is worth an hour of your time to investigate it. It's a fantastic, very approachable application. It essentially sits on top of whatever your database is. We normally advise clients to use something like an Azure data lake. And then using the common data service, all of your data, legacy data, online traffic data, whatever it is, can be ingested into one place. Customer Insights then overlays across the top of that like a lens, and it's got really powerful AI capability. It effectively gives normal people the ability to analyze data in the way that a data scientist would look at it. And more importantly, it doesn't just take data in one direction and look at it and report on it. You're able to feed it back into your operating systems, particularly if you're using something like Dynamics 365 or indeed Office 365. You can surface these insights back from Customer Insights back into your first line workers, your back office workers, whatever it may be, where they can make changes to how they respond to your client requirements in order to drive incremental value. And it's that that will deliver significant enhancements to ROI, and it's that type of capability that will allow those that adopt it to thrive and take market share in the new normal. I'm conscious I'm probably overstaying my welcome, so very, very quickly, I just want to leave you with a couple of recommendations. The first one is when you approach a transformation project, there is quite a common theme when we speak to clients, where they will try to encompass everything that they could ever possibly want within a system into their initial brief. Now, in the past, when you were dealing with legacy systems and coding and years of development, there were some good reasons why that might be useful. Today, it thoroughly gets in the way. We always encourage clients, look at what must you have and what should you have, and think about, we call that Moscow rating, for example. But things that you must have and should have, that's probably your minimal viable product that needs to be delivered. Things like you could have or you might like to have, those things in our experience sometimes never happen. I mean, the classic example, the client that says, well, we need our system to facilitate the three-legged stool. And you say, okay, would you need that now? And I say, well, no, we don't need it now. And we then say, okay, would you need it next year? No, we wouldn't need it next year, but we think we might need it at some point. And the approach today is very much to say, we don't put that into your system, into your solution spec. We would deal with that flexibly at the time, and you deal with those types of very specific requirements these days classically in Power Platform, in Power Apps, and we will be able to create a solution for that particular thing, should at some point it be needed, that is connected and easily connected, that could be dropped into the wider solution using Power Platform to deal with it at that time. But because organizations change and adapt, it's very, very common to have somebody in an organization or a team think that something might be needed in 3 or 4 years' time, but actually it never is. And consequently, systems are overspec'd, they are overpriced, and they become very difficult to achieve the right levels of ROI. So focus on the primary functionality of your system and focus on that with respect to the solution design, and then look to deliver it in an agile way. So getting the minimum viable product to your users as fast as it's possible to do in order to optimize the ROI. The second recommendation before I close is try to think holistically. Very popular in the old days to think in terms of siloed procurement. Yeah, we need a new CRM system. What's the best CRM system for us anywhere in the world, and how do we procure for that? And then thinking about whether it's your sales or your finance system or your manufacturing system or whatever it is, and you end up with these environments that are stitched together with interfaces. And of course, in the world of cloud, applications are updated very regularly, monthly with respect to Microsoft, 6 monthly, very big updates. And of course, as soon as applications are updated, all of those interfaces need to be managed and maintained, which is a big strain on your IT function or on your managed service provider, which effectively is just another way of saying cost. And it becomes harder and harder to create seamless workflows across organizations. Most of your teammates will be very, very familiar with the personal productivity tools available within Office 365. Dynamics 365 and Azure allow you to holistically streamline all of your cross-enterprise workflows in a very effective and efficient way. And that holistic way of looking at your procurement around IT infrastructure for us is really, really important, and will certainly be a key defining factor between those that win in the new normal and those that struggle more. My last thought is this, and hopefully this is something that resonates with everyone on the call. IT functions, if they were ever perceived as there to just keep the lights on, they are no longer perceived as that. Many organizations, I think, have found in the last 3 months that their IT functions are frankly phenomenal. The work that has been done at the pace that it's been done enable organizations to adapt. They may not be thriving, but they've adapted and improvised to the challenges that COVID has presented, has been astonishing. Now more than ever, the right CIO, the right IT team, the right strategy is going to be central to the strategic leadership of your organizations to help you liberate and empower your enterprise to thrive through dramatic change. And we are certainly here and willing to help you with those discussions. I'd encourage you, hopefully some of the things that I've talked about today have resonated. I know, Ajay, my apologies, I know I've sort of talked through some of the question time that we had, but I hope it's been useful. I really encourage you, anything here that's resonated, reach out to your Bechtle account manager. They'll be able to help you, and we're there and able to support them in whatever discussions that you need to have.
Brilliant, thank you, Ashley. I didn't want to stop your flow because it was very good, and I appreciate the content. We did have a few questions, but we have run out of time, and I am conscious that I don't want to overextend our welcome with you guys. So what I'm going to do is I will personally respond to each of the questions that came through. And I will send an email with some actions on there in terms of the answers as well. There was a couple questions around licensing that came up, and I'll just touch upon that quickly. The licensing really is subject to the requirement, and what we do from a Bechtle standpoint is a very simple understand, design, deploy, support model. It's that understand phase where we really get to know what the profile of the user looks like, and therefore define what the licensing looks like, and then bring in QUANTIQ at the back end from a services standpoint as well. And that's really how the partnership works, and it's worked very well because it's allowed us to create out-of-the-box solutions for our customers as well. Ashley, do you mind just scrolling down for a second, please, so I can just run through the below? Brilliant. And just so you guys are aware, these are the upcoming webinars, and please let us know if you have any but feedback, or the ones that you want to see and join. And if there's any ones that you want to see coming in July, then please let us know as well. So thank you everyone for your time, and hopefully we will catch up soon for the next webinar on the 18th of June, which is on to outsource or not to outsource. Thank you. Cheers, Ashley.
Thanks,
as well.
AJ. Thanks so much.